Attachment was dangerous, particularly in this line of work, particularly when you are attached to someone smaller and weaker than yourself. It was a recipe for disaster. That was driven home to Barry by Batman. After little Robin had been hurt by the Joker, the Bat had brooded, worse than usual, for days. 12 days, to be exact. The same number of days the 10-year-old had lain in a coma. At first, none of the Justice Leaguers had known what was wrong with old Bats, just that he was in a sour mood. He'd even snapped at Superman when the Kryptonian had asked if he was all right. Bats was secretive about everything, so really the League knew that they'd have to do a little digging to find out what was up. It was Black Canary who found out that Robin had been hurt. Apparently, her aunt lived in Gotham and was in the hospital after breaking her arm. She'd heard a nurse talking about the superhero who had been brought in a few days prior. Of course, Black Canary had reported this to Superman, who had told the rest of them, and requested that they keep an eye on Batman. Apparently, Boy Scout and Bats were friends in the real world, too, and Robin was Bat's surrogate son, or something. Canary had said that Robin hadn't looked good when she'd gotten the chance to look into his room, and Superman had said that Batman wouldn't react well if he lost his, sidekick. Barry had volunteered to speed on over to the hospital and watch over the little tyke, and the others had agreed. They wanted to ask Batman what had happened and why he kept it from them. They were all a little emotionally invested in Robin as well. He was so young. So, he speeded to the hospital in outer Gotham as fast as he could, and got there before Batman, as his secret identity, but Barry barely gave him any attention, had left. "Flash," the man said, surprise evident in his voice. "I got this, dude," Barry said, though he kept his eyes on Robin's slack face. "The others have some questions for you at the watchtower." "They can wait." Apparently, the glare was just as intimidating without the mask and cowl. "Only if you want them all coming in here, my friend," Barry said. "None of them are particularly happy about you not telling them." "It's none of their business," the man growled. "None of yours, either." "How much of your business is it?" Barry asked. "You're not his father. I'm as good as." Flash ignored that and plowed on. "Your loyalty is to the League, and they don't like all your secret-keeping and moodiness. They want to make sure you are not compromised by this." "Is it any of their business if I am?" Then Batman seemed to think about what he said, and with a sigh rose from the chair he had been sitting in. "Come and get me if there is any change." "I will. Scout's honor." They shared a quick grin, and then old Bats leaned down to press a kiss into the boy's forehead. "Wake up for me, Dickie," he said quietly. Then he turned to Flash. "If anything happens to him, I shall hold you personally responsible, Barry Allen." Barry grimaced. Sometimes Bats used their secret IDs as a way to impress the importance of something upon him and the other Leaguers. It was largely effective. Then the man was gone, leaving the Flash alone in the room with a comatose sidekick and the steady beat of the heart monitor. Nothing happened at the hospital, except that Barry, after changing into some civvies, managed to sweet-talk one of the nurses into telling him what kind of injuries Robin had been brought in with. Okay, he actually said he was the kid's uncle, but still. Apparently he had severe internal bleeding, cuts on his back, legs, and torso, and many broken bones. Also, the letter J branded on his chest. The last bit made Barry a little dizzy with hatred for the clown, but he brushed it aside with the thought that it must be worse for Bats. When Robin woke up the next day, Barry had still been there because he had nothing else to do, and the League wanted an eye kept on Batman at all times, if possible. Batman, as his civilian identity, had hugged the boy tightly and then threatened to ground him for the rest of his life for not listening to him. At first, he'd been serious, but Robin had smiled. The boy had bright blue eyes. Barry filed that info away for further perusal. And Batman had melted. And sent Flash outside with a glare. But whatever. Flash simply watched through the window on the door that the Bat had his back to. His shaking back. And in the name of all things fast, was the Bat crying? Then Robin narrowed his eyes in Flash's direction, and the speeder took off. But he promised himself he would never get a protege. Not anyone who could do to him what Robin had done to the stalwart Batman. Barry was pretty sure that he would end up doing more than crying. He promised himself. Never. He wouldn't be able to take it. The boy had become Batman's son, and he could never... He wondered how he'd be able to take it if he and his wife ever had a kid. Then he made another promise. His kid would not be dragged into his work. He remembered his promises. But when Batman came to his house with a red-headed teen, about 2 years older than Robin, by his side, and said something about a home experiment and difficulty controlling his powers, which included, mostly, speed, and the kid smiled with huge, goofy smile, he couldn't say no. He couldn't just turn the boy away. But he remembered his promise. So when the kid asked what to call him when he wasn't Flash, he didn't say, "Call me your brother," or "Call me your father." He said, "Call me your uncle, kid." Attachment was dangerous, particularly in this line of work. Particularly when you are attached to someone smaller and weaker than yourself. It was a recipe for disaster. And whenever Wally got hurt, his Uncle Barry was reminded of that all over again, and had to remind himself that he would do exactly the same thing over if given the chance.